Hi, and welcome to Migraine Realities. I'm Jillian, your host and fellow migraine warrior. This is a space for real talk about life with migraine. We talk about the hard stuff. I know this life from the inside. I live with chronic migraine, vestibular, hemiplegic, and chronic cluster headaches. That's just part of what I carry into these conversations. So come on in, let's talk. Today I'm joined by Kim. She is married, lives in Florida, misses California terribly. In fact, just used to live very close to me, and now she moved away from me. Didn't even know it. She is raising twin grandsons who are 12 years old. Hooray for you. Good job.
Hooray.
And
Full-time job.
yes, and she lives with chronic migraine. It used to be intractable, is now chronic, and has hypothyroidism and has back issues bad enough to have done 2 back surgeries so far, with perhaps more to follow. So, Kim, welcome to the program. So
Thank
glad to
you.
have you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Let's start with a brief overview of your migraine journey, and then I will dig in and be nosy.
I started experiencing disabling headaches in my late 20s. I was working in radio, busy doing theater, and having a really adventurous and hectic life. I would get these headaches after a Friday night out with my coworkers that would put me in bed for the remainder of the weekend. And I knew it was more than a hangover or just fatigue from a busy work week. They were nauseating, vomiting, couldn't come out of the bed for anything, headaches. And I didn't do too much about them. I would take Advil and rest and go back to work on Monday. They didn't happen that frequently, so I wasn't really alarmed enough to get help. Shortly after I got married and moved across the country, I started experiencing headaches regularly. Same profile, no Friday night camaraderie involved. They were just random. Could be in the middle of the work week. And I was a newlywed, so it was pretty disturbing that I was spending entire weekends in bed.
Mm-hmm.
Advil used to help a little bit in the beginning, but not really that much. I was so nauseated I couldn't swallow my own saliva in the beginning. And my husband's cousin had migraines, and she said, "You better get her to a neurologist. This is what I'm taking." At the time, Imitrex injections were the first only for migraine medication. She was using that very successfully. So I got a neurologist and I got Imitrex injections, and we were off to the races. And I remained episodic for about 10 years. It was difficult. I worked for an insurance company, large insurance company. And when my boss went to lunch, I'd have to lay down on his office floor and give myself an Imitrex injection in the thigh and lay there for an hour trying to feel well enough to make it through the afternoon. This went on for years, but I was still functioning and working, and I had a child by then. Somewhere in my mid 40s, I started to notice the increase in frequency, and I was really being put down. And honestly, I was already stretching my sick days, which does not help your career.
Mm-hmm.
And I had upped my licensing and my career, and I'd really worked hard over that decade to build my career. So I was really reluctant to take a step back, but I did. I worked as a subcontractor to someone in financial planning. I worked roughly 3 days a week because he would get all the credit for the sales that I handled, and I would get the alleviation of pressure. I didn't have to work any certain day. As long as I got a little bit of work done and he got all the credit for it, it was a marriage made in heaven for a short while.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just became more and more difficult, and I ended up filing for disability. At this point in time, I was having migraine 5 days a week at least. It wasn't 7 days a week. I did get an occasional day off for good behavior, but I really couldn't show up on a specific day and function. And the only kind of work I could have done at that point would be that it didn't involve having to drive and meet with someone, or it didn't involve me having to complete anything on any specific given day because I never knew what I was going to be facing.
Mm-hmm.
So this is about the 20-year mark for chronic. And I, in that period of time, saw lots of different neurologists. I spent a week in a headache clinic in Chicago. I came home from that experience on so much medication that I was dizzy. I could hardly get off the couch.
Mm.
And I went to see my neurologist and said, the medication's great. It's keeping the headaches away, but I can't get off the couch. And he said, well, what would you like to do? Would you like to have migraines or would you like to be on the couch dizzy? And I
Not
said,
fair.
I started to cry.
Oh.
And I said, are these my choices? I can be disabled on the couch, unable to function, or I can be in pain. And he just shrugged. And I said, I was angry by then. I
Mm-hmm.
said, fine, I will live my life in pain because I'm not going to be that kind of disabled where I can't even vacuum, leave my house. It was kind of frightening. And the headache clinic had lowered the dose a few times for me because it was not agreeing with me.
Mm.
From there, I tried all kinds of things. I tried acupuncture, different neurologists. I drove to San Francisco. I visited San Francisco for some treatment. Tried a lot of things. I tried all of the antidepressants that can sometimes prevent migraine. Those didn't typically agree with me. I was on beta blockers, which is a hypertensive medication. One of those did work for me for a period of time, and then it just kind of stopped working. And the medications that became available for migraines improved, as you know, CGRP blockers. I tried AIM the moment it was on the market. It
Mm-hmm.
actually worked really well for me, but I developed severe joint pain with that medication and I
Mm.
couldn't stay on it, and the
Mm.
other ones didn't work the same. So, it's been a 30-year journey of try and fail, try and fail. And how do I live with this disease, but not let it overtake my life? I was working on a life coaching credential. I
Mm.
worked really hard on the mental aspects of who am I? Am I a migraine or am I something more? I kind of
Mm-hmm.
launched a part time art business because I was able to do this because it was flexible enough and supplement my income, doing faux finishing and muraling and begging for the flexibility of my clients. I used to tell them that I'm priced competitively with other decorative artists in the area because I have migraines and I may need to beg your patience. I won't
Mm-hmm.
put in an 8-hour day and I may have to call off a day if I have a really bad migraine. And people were fantastic. So
Mm.
I was very clever at making it work for me. But I worked really hard on trying to figure out how I could live my life despite having pain that sometimes put me in bed. And,
Mm-hmm.
I've told you before in conversation that I also worked with a health coach. I uncovered a lot of things that the neurologists touched on, but never really explained to me why it's so important that you get a good night's sleep. I found out for me, 7 hours is adequate. I don't have to get 8, 7, and I'm golden, and I'm much less likely to have a headache if all these little things are synced. So I learned what my issues are with food and what to avoid. I got better sleep. I actually took an independent sleep class to kind of unravel, why am I not sleeping well? Part of it
Ooh.
is that you're in pain.
Mm-hmm.
You're having migraines, and it's typical for many migraineurs to lose sleep and have irregular sleep patterns because you're knocked out during the day. Sometimes you wake up at 3 in the morning and your body says, well, you rested enough today. Or your circadian rhythm is a little off, and you get that perimenopause 3 a.m. check-in that
Mm.
sometimes you can't go back to sleep from.
Big hot
So
flash and insomnia.
yeah, I think in my early 40s, I started suffering from a lot of sleep irregularities. So I worked really hard on that. The food, how much is right for me? Too much, too little, it has to be a balance. So it's finding the right balance for you.
Mhm.
I'm kind of doing more than I did 20 years ago. I had a bigger, fatter, lazier dog at that time. The dog I have now is tall and lanky and likes to go. I roughly do 2, sometimes 3 miles a day, but I don't overdo and try to be a hero. I remember one time when I was doing pretty well and I had actually made a change in the frequency of my migraine, and I knocked it down from 5 to maybe 1 a week.
Wow.
That I got really
Hmm.
excited. My energy level was improving so dramatically that I went out and took a 4-mile hike through the foothills of New Mexico. And my coach said, "No, take
Uh-huh.
it easy,
Mhm.
slowly build up to that kind of thing." I felt so good. And then I couldn't
Mhm.
move the rest of the day. But,
Oh no.
I fine tuned some things that I was shocked that in conjunction with one another, they did help. So I don't really take prevention medication anymore. I do take abortive medications like Imitrex and Ubrelvy when I do have a migraine.
Mhm.
I did have back surgery twice in the last year,
Mhm.
lumbar. And that was pretty disruptive to the whole thing. It just kind of goes to show me that all of the balancing, diet, exercise, and sleep, the minute that you disrupt all of that, following my most recent surgery in March, I had a week-long headache, and then the next month was kind of rough.
Mhm.
And there were pain meds which trigger my head. There was anesthesia that you're coming out of, pain meds, and pain can disrupt your sleep. So all the reasons why my head was hurting worse were obvious to me. Fortunately, it's improving now, but it's been quite a journey, and I'm always looking for better ways to manage it. But it's something for people who are new to migraine that need to explore different things, because you may be like me, you may hit the wall and try medication after medication to prevent migraine. And if you get a side effect or it doesn't agree with you, it's kind of heartbreaking each time. You put your hope in a new medication and a new way of doing things, and if it fails, it can be pretty depressing.
Mhm. And I'm going to point out, I love that you just said when it fails, not you, you didn't fail the medicine failed.
Right.
I think that's an important distinction.
It is. It really is, because you can wonder why, you'll hear some people, there's a lot of groups and support groups where you can see what other people are doing. And when those CGRP meds hit the market, people were like, "I'm not having any more migraines. This works for me. I'm so happy." And then it
Mhm.
did not work for me. It gave
Mhm.
me serious side effects,
Mhm.
and it can be a letdown each time. And you're kind of back to square one.
Mhm.
So it is really important to know that as a young person or a new person to migraine, that there is a whole lot out there you can
Mhm.
explore. And if one thing doesn't work for you, then it just wasn't the right one for you.
Mhm. We talked earlier on the phone about you had a hard time in New Mexico.
I
I wanted
did.
to talk about environmental effects.
At that time, we moved from California to the high desert in New Mexico, and altitude had always been a trigger for me. So I don't know what I was thinking by moving
Mhm.
there, but we had some family there and we thought we would give it a try. More of the migraines I was getting in New Mexico were putting me in bed. I mean, flat out not functional.
Mm.
Telling my husband, "You're in charge of dinner
Mm.
tonight, I'm going to bed," and it taking a long time to get relief from anything. And that's using ice and meds and sleeping and trying everything I knew how to do to self right again. I think I've always had that type of migraine on occasion, but I also had the type of migraine where you can take an Imitrex and go sit on the couch and watch the Today Show or a movie or something. And after a period of time, you're going to be feeling well enough to maybe cook dinner. You might
Mhm.
not be, blazing trails, but you're okay. And New Mexico was just putting me down far too frequently.
Mm.
So it was solely the change in altitude. And I had family in Denver as well, and I'd been through the same thing. I went there for a family wedding. I had a migraine the entire week. I was miserable. I was nauseated. They were next level migraines for me because they brought all of the bad symptoms along with them.
Mm-hmm.
The nausea and just really being ill. And I don't get nauseated with every migraine I have, fortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I decided to look into health coaching, and it paid off for me. I was living in the altitude. I was not getting triggered by the altitude any longer. I was not getting triggered by barometric pressure changes, which have always been an issue for me,
Mm-hmm.
and they've never been an issue again since.
Considering you live in Florida and there's a thunderstorm right now, as you say,
Yeah,
you're very fortunate. You went from high altitude to lots of weather. So
to
it's a
sea
good
level
thing, sea
and
level,
lots of,
which is
yeah.
nice, but more weather than California gets, that's for certain.
Definitely. Yeah, we've been having thunderstorms. I'm really grateful they don't trigger me here because in the summer it's almost daily that we get something to.
Tell me what it's like. You are raising two of your grandsons, twins, 12 years old. Tell me what that has been like.
That was one of the things in New Mexico that was really upsetting to me because I am raising children and they were about 8 at that time and they were in a new school, in a new place, and I was really struggling. And my husband was starting to take the one that plays soccer to his games, and I was having to miss things, and that was really upsetting me. So
Mm-hmm.
that was another motivating factor for me getting extra help, that I wanted to be able to show up for them and be at those soccer games. It takes a lot of energy, but my husband is heavily involved in helping raise them. He has since then retired, but at the time, he was having to step in and do more. And I don't care if he's willing or able to step in and take over for me, I still felt guilty. And I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of migraineurs have to lean on their family or lean on their partner. You feel guilty about it. It's natural to feel that way. I wanted to be able to show up for them. And there are still days, recently with the back surgery, and my migraines have been a little less predictable since my surgery, where I've had to say, hey, Joe, will you take the kids? Or I can't go with you to soccer today. It's not happening for me today. But you don't want that to be the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got one that's going to be going into marching band, and that's going to be a hard one to keep up with, I think.
Yes.
So
Parades, lots of
I have to,
parades,
yes, hot parades.
hot parades. Yes.
Yeah. So we will see what happens.
I understand one of them has migraine.
One of them developed migraine last summer, and it was, I'll try not to cry here because, the 30 years of what I've gone through myself, it's kind of suck it up. I'm used to it. This is
Mm-hmm.
me. I'm an adult. I can get through this. But when your child suddenly goes from 0 headaches to daily,
Mm-hmm.
very painful daily headache, it's kind of heartbreaking. And we have since found some wonderful treatment. He has a fantastic neurologist. So we are blessed. We have made huge progress with his migraines as
Mm-hmm.
well. He's not suffering them. I wouldn't even say he has them weekly anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And we left daily in the dust. But it was difficult because he was starting his first experience with band.
Mm-hmm.
And being in a loud music room with a brand new instrument you don't know, all the kids are honking and playing at the
It's
same time.
horrible.
And I was really worried about him, but he did a fantastic job. I equipped him with blue blocker glasses and noise reducing earbuds. He could still hear what the teacher's saying, and it just turned the volume down for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he got through that difficult time. I do want to note that I had asked his primary care to run a complete blood panel on him because I have thyroid problems. And when my thyroid is very hypo, it triggers my head. So I was worried about that. She failed to run a vitamin D check, which really shocked me.
That's
So
kind of basic.
It is very basic, and low vitamin D is another migraine trigger. And I made it 30 years without knowing vitamin D was key to migraine health, that you're in the normal range. So the new neurologist checked the blood work she had done and said, I don't see vitamin D, so I'm going to run that. And I didn't think anything of it until it came back low. So apparently there's some genetic link. Mom had low vitamin D too at one time. And that was an easy fix, and it helped. He still is
Wonderful.
genetically a migrainer, but he's not having them all the time.
Wonderful. Good to
Yeah.
hear. You talked about thyroid. How did you find out that you had hypothyroidism? How did you know to be tested? Or was it just you found it through a normal physical? That kind of thing.
No, I was always asking to be tested. I'd had some symptoms of hypothyroidism, and I was asking to be tested annually because I did have some symptoms. I did have some thinning in my eyebrows. I had some hair loss, some brittle hair, some dry skin. I was noticing some symptoms, and I went into the doctor and I said, I'm just feeling really crummy lately. I think it's time to test my thyroid again. She took my blood pressure and it was like 90/59. And she said,
Wow.
I don't know how you walked in here today. How are you even on your feet? That's fairly low blood pressure. We're going to run a full thyroid panel. And at that time, they turned up Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid condition. And I was indeed low. So I had to start supplementation for making up the thyroid hormone that my body wasn't making.
And how did that affect your migraines?
Yeah, I think that low thyroid is a trigger. Your entire hormonal system is out of balance. And, at this point, it was affecting my blood pressure and I didn't know it. But everything being out of balance in your body can affect your migraine triggers.
Right.
Your hormones are low, your blood pressure is low. All these things certainly can trigger the development of a migraine. During that period of time, I just noticed I would have more migraines when my thyroid was low. So I always wanted to make sure I was on top of it.
That's
And
great. Wrapping it up, I have 2 questions for you. First
okay,
one, what would you tell someone who doesn't know anything about migraine? What would you tell them so that they might understand?
that's a tough one. It kind of depends on who the person is because it's a long story. If they were really interested in knowing, I would tell them it's a complex neurological condition that comes with a whole lot of symptoms that are beyond a headache. It can come with nausea, vomiting, vertigo. What you can add some things to the list here. I only know what my symptoms have been.
Sure.
Really, the symptoms that people get when a migraine is coming on and the symptoms that they are left with the day after it goes away. Fatigue, mind-numbing fatigue. Sometimes the day after the migraine, I'm
Brain
left
fog.
trying to remember why I feel so bad.
Exactly.
And the period leading up to the migraine where I'm yawning a lot or I have weird energy, I feel kind of good maybe, and then it all comes crashing down. Or I'm irritable, I'm angry.
Oh.
You didn't do anything wrong. I think I'm getting a migraine because I'm really irritable right now.
I
That's
feel that, and I warned my husband. I'm sorry, but yes, I can tell.
Yeah, that's a hard one with kids because sometimes they're pushing your buttons and you're kind of going down the tubes and you say, I'm not mad at you. I'm just not feeling real good right now. It really depends on the person I'm talking to, what it is they're wanting to know. For me, they were the end of my career. They were disabling and made me miss out on a lot of things that I wanted to do, but they were something that I learned how to live with. I worked really hard to keep a life despite having pain on a regular basis. And I'd like to say I triumphed over them at one point in time, and I think I have in some ways, but I have learned quite a bit, and I am in a better place than I was.
What would you tell someone who maybe has hit that wall and has kind of lost hope?
That's a really tough one because that feeling is common for anyone who's ended up with chronic or intractable migraine. I can't tell you what the answer is that will make it better for you, but I can share from being a much older person who's been through every imaginable migraine treatment and medication and functional health coaching that there's oftentimes something out there for you that you haven't tried yet or you haven't discovered. If you can pull yourself together and not let it define you, but also demand excellence from the doctors that you see and the information that you get, you may be like me, where you can unlock something that makes it a little better. You may always have migraine disease, but it doesn't mean that it's always going to be at this level. It might be better than this if you hang in there and be open to different types of treatment, different types of information, different types of medication. It's tough when you take something and you hang your hopes on it. I think this is what they say is the new thing and it's going to help me. I'm going to get my life back. And then that medication doesn't work. It's a blow each time that happens. I know, I've been there. I would say just hang in there, engage with the migraine community, those pages on social media where people gather and talk about what they know and what they're doing have been invaluable to me over the years. I've learned so much from other patients that has made my own treatment better to just invest in yourself, basically.
What would you say? I lied. I have 3 questions. So my third question is, what would you tell someone who was in your grandson's situation where they were getting the headaches and the different symptoms that come with migraine, but they haven't been diagnosed yet and they need to find a doctor? What would you suggest to a person in that situation?
If you suspect that your child has migraine, I'd say if you suspect your child has migraine, to see a neurologist. Don't let your primary care doctor necessarily make that decision and treat them. Our neurologist has been golden. They've recommended everything from vitamins and how much and what type of vitamins to take. We uncovered a vitamin D deficiency. That was huge. Blood testing, a good full blood panel. It was like his primary care doctor had kind of failed and dropped the ball and not run the right testing. This is our second neurologist, by the way. I wasn't fond of the results we were getting with the first one. I didn't really have a good feeling about the information she was giving us. So within the first 6 months, we made a switch. And I was so glad that I did. I've learned things from my child's neurologist that I never knew. In 30 years of having migraines,
Wow.
I'm learning new things because of my kid. And I don't know if there's support groups for children with pediatric migraine. I haven't looked because we're just kind of doing fairly well at the moment, but there might.
There is a support group for parents of children and teenagers who have migraine. It's a Facebook support group, and I'll be sure to link
Excellent.
that information below. Kim, thanks so much for being here today. You shared such great information and insight. I'm glad you're doing better, and I really hope to see you again.
Thank you for having me, Jillian.
So, wrapping it up today, if you are in a difficult place, you're struggling, having a hard time, I'm really glad that you came to listen or to watch. And hopefully, you got at least one thing out of this that could help change your life. If you just get that one thing, then we would be so happy about that. Please remember to be kind to yourself, give yourself grace, and be good to you. Thanks for being here.
You.
Wrap. Okay, now that's a wrap.